Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, a new push to counter China. Washington and Japan announcing a historic alliance upgrade designed to help counter the Chinese communist regime.
First time, Japan and the United States and Australia will create a network system of air, missile, and defense architecture.
The head of the FBI warns that China is America's defining threat, adding Beijing-based hackers could be preparing to launch more cyber attacks, and U.S. businesses are a prime target. The possible easing of a U.S. travel advisory against China. How could the shift impact Americans, and why did the State Department impose it in the first place? And China's communist leader says external forces won't stop what he called a reunion with Taiwan. More on a rare meeting between the Chinese regime leader and Taiwan's former president. A joint push to counter China. President Biden announcing the most significant upgrade to Washington's alliance with Japan since its signing over 70 years ago.
I'm also pleased to announce that for the first time, Japan and the United States and Australia will create a network system of air, missile, and defense architecture.
In a press conference with the Japanese Prime Minister, Biden said more joint military exercises are on the horizon between the U.S., U.K., and Japan. Plus, Washington has something else under consideration, adding Japan to a security pact between the U.S., U.K., and Australia,
which focuses on advanced capabilities, including AI, autonomous systems.
The pact has two parts. The first one is designed to arm Australia with nuclear-powered submarines so it can better counter Chinese aggression. That says Beijing's growing military might worries Australia's Indo-Pacific neighbors.
Our two countries will continue to respond to challenges concerning China through close coordination. At the same time, we confirmed the importance of continuing our dialogue with China.
The second pillar of the pact is where Japan might come in. It focuses on defense and technology cooperation. Under it, 2 Japanese astronauts would join future U.S. missions to the moon. As a show of friendship, Japan is also giving the U.S. 250 new cherry trees, meant to replace the ones being uprooted at Washington, D.C.'s tidal basin during seawall repairs. Fumio Kishida has revamped Japan's defense strategy to cope with the rising China threat, especially in case of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. He plans to double Japan's defense spending to 2% of the national GDP by 2027. That would make Japan the 3rd largest military spender after the U.S. and China. Tokyo is also speeding up developing next-generation missiles capable of hitting targets in China and North Korea. It also bought missiles from the U.S. and lifted its cap on export bans so that it can send Patriot missiles to the U.S. Kishida is set to join a talk with President Biden and the Philippines president on Thursday. He's also set to address Congress, making him the 2nd ever Japanese prime minister to receive the honor. But before that, some delicious food. Biden is expected to treat Kishida to dry-aged ribeye steak and a performance by Paul Simon at the White House Wednesday night. For more analysis on the Biden-Kishida summit, we welcome William Chu, Japan Chair Fellow at Hudson Institute. He attended the official welcome ceremony for the Japanese Prime Minister on the White House lawn earlier Wednesday. William Chu, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Glad to be here, Tiffany.
Now, this bilateral summit between President Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is the biggest upgrade to this alliance since the 1960 Mutual Defense Treaty. Now, how big of a deal is this for each side?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a huge advancement because what it does is actually it allows U.S. Forces in Japan to work more on an operational level closely with their Japanese counterparts. That's partly due to sort of the Japanese stepping up their defense buildup, as well as developing joint operation centers of their own. But it's also sort of a U.S. reflection that, hey, we can no longer, if there's a contingency, we're no longer going to operate separately from the Japanese, which is the traditional model. Instead, we're going to move our coordination hub to Tokyo instead of necessarily back in Hawaii. And so that if there's ever anything that emerges in Western Asia or in the Pacific, I think we are in a much better position to work closely with our Japanese allies.
Now, back on the defense side, we did see that for the first time, the U.S. will change its force structure in Japan to maximize joint operations. Now, Japan has been moving away from that pacifist phase and instead bolstering its defense amid rising aggressions from both China and North Korea in the region. Given that, many are now saying Japan is arguably the U.S.'s most important ally in the region. What does that signal in terms of the geopolitical climate there?
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, I just got back from a week-long trip in Japan back in March, and I had a lot of conversations. And I think the thing that I was struck most was that how much they were shaken by the invasion of Ukraine, right? Because previously there was this assumption that any kind of military development or procurement would lead to militarism. And I think there's a new realism in Japan that, what happened in Ukraine can be this unlawful, revisionist, aggressive action by a country towards another is very possible. It happened in Ukraine. It could happen in East Asia. You're certainly seeing China trying to do that in the South China Sea, and that Japan has to be more realistic about, taking responsibility for its security and contributing to the larger security output in East Asia, alongside with the United States, as well as potential future partners such as Australia, the Philippines, and South Korea.
William Chu, thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you again.
The FBI director is echoing a powerful warning. China is America's biggest threat. He emphasized Washington's concerns about cybersecurity at a gathering of the American Bar Association. That's as cases of Chinese espionage activities pop up across the country.
China's hackers have been positioning on American infrastructure in preparation to wreak havoc and cause real-world harm to American citizens and communities. Today, we're seeing China's increasing build-out of offensive weapons within our critical infrastructure, setting up persistent PRC access in our critical sectors like telecommunications, energy, water, poised to attack whenever Beijing decides the time is right.
Ray says that China's cyber program is larger than that of every other major nation. China's hackers outnumber FBI cyber personnel by 50-1 and have been prepared to launch potential cyber attacks against U.S. soil and natural gas companies ever since 2011. The Chinese Communist Party is concentrating all its effort on undermining the economy and security of free democratic countries. He also said that the CCP often uses espionage, foreign influence, and election interference in tandem, and that American businesses are a prime target. Is the Biden administration pulling itself closer to China? Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell just came out with news for travelers. The State Department is considering whether to drop its travel advisory against China. Though the senior diplomat still pointed out that Beijing's support to Russia harms U.S.-China relations. Commenting on Campbell's statement, Beijing said the U.S. should immediately ease what it described as the wrongful advisory, urging Americans not to visit China. But on the other side, Beijing also discourages its own citizens from traveling to the U.S. Beijing issued that travel warning weeks ago. That's after several Chinese students and others were denied entry when going through U.S. customs at airports. Media reports say the incidents are likely due to visitors having connections to the Chinese military. Back to the U.S. side, why does Washington discourage travel to China? Last June, the department updated its advisory for the country to Level 3, reconsider travel, citing concerns that American tourists in China could be subject to exit bans or wrongful detention. That's after China revised its anti-espionage law in recent months. The act gives Chinese authorities greater power to enforce punishments and a broader and more vague definition of what could be considered a crime without going through legal processes. A message from Beijing to Taipei. China's stance toward the island won't change anytime soon. Former Taiwanese President Ma Ying-jeou is meeting with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping Wednesday. During the exchange, Xi told Ma that no amount of outside interference will stop what he called the reunion between mainland China and Taiwan. The Chinese Communist Party sees Taiwan as part of China, despite never having ruled it. Ma Ying-jeou's political party favors close ties with China. But the current ruling party, the Democratic Progressive Party, is a staunch defender of Taiwan's self-governing status. Taiwanese residents are divided over Ma's visit to China.
In terms of the current situation between both sides of the strait, I don't think there's much harm in his visit, because someone needs to take on the role of peacemaker in the middle.
In the current international situation, as well as considering his position as a former president, the meeting is very inappropriate.
The Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, won Taiwan's 2016 presidential election by a landslide. It claimed victory again earlier this year, winning an unprecedented third term in power. A united message in an important meeting. Australia has a vested interest in maintaining regional stability. Australian lawmakers on Monday met with Taiwanese President Tsai, echoing the shared goal as regional tensions with China rise. That just days after the U.S. suggested a joint military submarine project could help.
当前面对威权主义的扩张，民主国家更要站在一起，强化合作的力道。
We know we are amongst friends, and we know that maintaining the status quo will be challenging, but we wish to reassure you that you are amongst friends.
We stand united against any threats to regional stability.
Andrew Wallace is Deputy Chair of Australia's Parliamentary Committee on Intelligence and Security, meeting with Tsai Ing-wen in Taipei's presidential office. He called security cooperation paramount. Last week, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell suggested that the AUKUS submarine project could help deter any Chinese move against Taiwan. The 2023 partnership that sees the U.S. and U.K. helping Australia get nuclear-powered attack submarines to help stave off Chinese aggression. China's economic outlook is taking another plunge. Its future downgraded yet again by another ratings agency. Here's NTD's Don Ma with a business brief on what's happening.
Ratings agency Fitch downgraded its outlook on the country's credit rating today. It reflects the challenging situation in China's public financing regarding the double whammy, if you will, of decelerating growth and more debt. So Fitch expects China's central and local government debt to rise to about 61% of gross domestic product in 2024, and this is up compared to 2023. And this is a clear deterioration compared to all the way back to 2019. Now, at the same time, the rating agency expects China's general deficit, which, by the way, covers infrastructure and other official fiscal activity outside the headline budget. It expects this to rise to 7.1% of GDP in 2024. And this is also up from 2023, and it's the highest since 2020. So lowering its ratings to negative outlook from stable indicates a downgrade is possible over the medium term. Now, Fitch forecasts China's economic growth would also slow compared to last year. The outlook downgrade follows similar moves by Moody's in December, and it comes as Beijing ratchets up efforts to spur a feeble post-COVID recovery in the world's second largest economy and fiscal monetary policy support. China's finance ministry denounced the downgrade of its outlook to negative. So how are people reacting to this news? Some analysts are saying that China faces some significant structural headwinds associated with inefficient investment, particularly in the property sector. And some are saying that the more immediate impact of adjusting the outlook rating could have an impact on the ability of the Chinese state and enterprises to raise U.S. dollar debt funding.
A trending ticker for the stock market, China-based online shopping giant Alibaba saw shares jump Wednesday following a rare public statement from co-founder Jack Ma, who's been out of the spotlight for the past few years. Here's more.
Jack Ma just might be making a comeback. The Alibaba co-founder has penned a rare and lengthy memo to employees. In it, he expresses support for restructuring efforts at the e-commerce titan. Some saw that as a signal he's ready to play an active role again after years out of the spotlight. Ma largely disappeared from public view after making a speech critical of Beijing regulators in late 2020. A massive share sale for financial firm Ant Group, which he also founded, subsequently got cancelled. That was followed by a regulatory crackdown on the whole tech sector, with Alibaba fined $2.8 billion. Ma has since spent much of his time abroad, including in Tokyo, where he is a visiting lecturer at a university institute. Now the hint of a return comes after a turbulent year for Alibaba. 12 months ago it said it would split into 6 units, marking the biggest shake-up in its 25-year history. It later announced, then cancelled, share sales for 2 of the divisions and installed a new chief executive. In his internal message, Ma praised company boss Eddie Wu and the move to split into 6. He also said the firm needed to have the courage to admit and correct past mistakes. Alibaba's Hong Kong shares surged around 5% on Wednesday amid investor hopes that Ma's comeback could now be in the offing.
Alibaba's U.S.-listed shares gained nearly 2% in Wednesday morning trading. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 3 years. If you'd like to support us, consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus or subscribe to our partner platform Epic TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Just click the link down below. Here's what to look out for in our second half. The U.S. recruiting brilliant Chinese minds to develop AI, but the welcome comes with a risk that the knowledge could fall into the wrong hands. An analyst breaks down the conundrum.
If they're producing most of the top-level researchers, and they're going to be leading in the future if we're not careful.
Are German companies losing to Chinese firms? A new survey reveals how their businesses in China are feeling the squeeze. More on the unfair advantages and fierce competition they're facing. And Taiwan's president visits the epicenter of last week's earthquake. She inspected the progress of recovery efforts and thanked rescue teams for their hard work. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.